All right, now I'm joined by Matthew Richtman, who took all of U.S. distance running by surprise this past weekend with a victory in 2:07:57 at the LA Marathon. First American man to win it in like 30 plus years. I feel like that's the part that like the mainstream news outlets are like clinging on to,
Hmm.
especially I guess given how much LA has gone through over the past couple months. But it's been a couple days now since the race. What are the feelings right now? Because your Instagram post, where you're like, it's so hard to come up with the words, and I'm hoping that getting you on a podcast, we found some of those words.
Yeah, no, I mean it's still kind of sinking in, right? There's so much to go over, and obviously it was a very exciting time. But I'm really thankful for the opportunity to get to run there and really just be there in front of the U.S. and like you said, like I think it was 31 years since the last American winner, so that's super important. And then also just again, just kind of showing up and having a good day to time wise. So
The After we put up sort of like the reel and the graphic with the performance, so many people probably were just like, "Who?" And I guess for me, your name sticks out because I remember you from the 2023 NCAA Cross Country Championships, where
yeah,
you had maybe one of the most baller performances, starting off in like 200th place, just holding steady at 3 minutes per K, and then still ending up, what was it, like 26 or something like that
yeah, yeah.
in that race. And it was just one of the wildest performances from that day. You, you know, continue running post collegiately, take to the roads. You have some strong performances in the half, and then
Mhm.
this pops. I mean, last fall you had your marathon debut in Twin Cities, but I guess where did this 207 come from?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, right? You're right. A lot of people have been asking, and for me, I think it was always in the works. I mean, obviously it was, right? But you know, this only being the second marathon, I think that really plays into it as well, just because, when I came into Twin Cities, first marathon, just really not knowing what to expect. It's 20 miles further than I've ever raced in college, right? So it's quite the adjustment and just trying to figure out how that plays out, what stages of the race, or what you're going to feel in certain parts. So it was kind of a learning curve there, and really having that experience coming into LA was a huge bonus. Just knowing, I got a little bit better feel of what 26 miles feels like, and so that kind of played into it. So I guess to answer your question, like the jump, the almost 3 minute jump, right, from 210 to 207, I think that just came mostly from changing training a little bit to fit into the LA course, and really just that experience of Twin Cities and knowing, I had a couple of those halves too the last couple of weeks, so having the confidence from those coming into LA is kind of what made it what it was.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into your training, but we'll stay on just the race for a bit. Why LA?
There was a couple of reasons. So timing wise, it was pretty good. Just coming off Twin Cities and being able to reset and then work on a training block again, and that was kind of a perfect timing considering. And then really, I mean, there was two other main reasons. Was I was, I saw myself in the mix. You could see the results from previous years, and um, looking at LA, I think the winner last year was like 211. So coming off Twin Cities, I was like, I know it's a different course and different day, and you can't compare apples to apples, but 210, that's right in that mix, right? So LA was a good opportunity to, be in that mix, have the opportunity to, go for the win, being with that group for long stages. And the third one was signing with Asics and having that sponsorship there. And I can't explain how amazing it was to be able to meet the whole Asics team. And they had pretty much everyone out here. You know, this is a big race for them, and everyone really. So just being able to be there, having an Asics sponsored race was huge too.
Yeah, I think I looked it up, and of the active U.S. marathoners right now, that have run 208 or faster. 3 of the 4 are now with Asics, and
Yeah.
making Ben Caesar look like an absolute genius for signing you. How did
Yeah.
that deal come about? Coming off of the fall marathon performance.
Yeah, and that's really the main performance that did it, right? Just because I think a lot of the emphasis too was that it was my debut. You see there are other Americans running 210, but I think Ben saw that it was my debut and that I had room to grow, and I mean that's kind of what showed in LA, right? But yeah, I mean, you definitely spoke to it, and we've talked about that too. That Asics is really putting their best foot forward, and we've got a lot of talent going into the future.
So going back to rewatch the race, what? Well, actually, before that, what were the expectations coming into it? Kind of based off of your training, like, did you know that something as quick as 207 high was in the cards?
Um, Sort of. That's sort of the thing of being self-coach is I don't really have someone in my ear saying, "Hey, this is where training corresponds to the race." So that was a little tricky. I knew that. So Twin Cities, I would say, was a really good race for me, but again, I struggled early on in that race just knowing what marathon pace felt like, right? So that's something that I think I did a better job. Again, that comes from a lot of that experience from Twin Cities, but just being a little bit more confident with those times. And my training block for LA was quite a bit better than my Twin Cities block, just because I did have, a little bit more knowledge of what worked in that first block and was able to alter it and ramp up some parts to allow me to run faster. But really, like the race day, I wasn't super focused on time. It was, again, really mostly going for that place. And I mean, there was a lot of things that went into it, right? And you can't always just say, oh, like I was just trying to win and not trying to run fast. Like, obviously, towards the end of the race, I was pushing quite a bit, trying to, keep my lead. But um, yeah, I didn't really have expectations time wise coming into the race.
So in the actual race, it felt like the last 15 miles or so were you pressing and soloing from the front. What were the fitness indicators that gave you sort of like the confidence to think like, oh, that's the point to make the move and press?
Yeah. So there's a couple things I want to talk about here. So the first one was kind of the move to begin with. Um, I've had a lot of different people telling me different things about how it happened, and I remember it differently than I think the race broadcast like showed it. But that's probably mostly on me, right? Um, but for me, it was around the 1 hour mark where, up until that point, I had just been saying, "Hey, just stay in this group. We don't want to take the lead, push the pace, or anything like that. Just stay controlled." And I think that's sometimes I get in those race environments where, maybe you have a pacer and the pacer's feels like he's running slow, right? And you're on his heels, just saying, when can we go? So that was almost my thinking in those first 10, 12 miles was, I was in that group, but I just wanted to keep going, right? But really that move when it happened, I think it was around mile 15 or so was when I first started to like break away. And that was mostly, I didn't really try to do that necessarily. It was kind of more of a, um, maybe had like a half step on them or something like that and decided, I might as well test it out a little bit, see, string this group out because I think we had a fair group of guys still at that point. So I wanted to string it out a little bit, and that's kind of how I found myself in the lead, and then decided, hey, you know what? I'll push a little bit here, see who comes with me, and no one really did at that point. So I figured, if no one wants to go, then this is my opportunity to push the pace a little bit. But again, I didn't really plan that out beforehand or never really envisioned that. When I was thinking about the race the day before and all of that, it was mostly staying in that group until those final couple miles. So I know it's definitely not super you don't see that too often in a marathon, right? But I guess it worked for me, and I felt good with it, so that's why I did it.
Did you have any concept of just sort of like the paces that you were running and just how fast you were going?
Yeah, I mean, I had my watch on, and that's something I've tried to work on as well because in the past, like for Twin Cities, for example, there were a couple miles where the pace was getting a little bit quicker, and I could feel the pace change, look down at my watch, and say, "Whoa, like this is a little bit quicker than I thought we would be going." So there was actually a point in Twin Cities where I actively took a step back and said, I'm not going to go with the leaders. And that's something that I've been working on because, especially in the half marathons that I've been doing, I've realized that a lot of times I get in that mentality that, I'm not going to go with them or I don't want to push this pace here. But for me in the long run, I think it helps just to not really focus on that. I'm still looking at my watch. Like I checked quite a few times at what pace we're doing or what stage in the race and blah blah blah. But I'm not really putting much pressure on that or looking at the pace and saying, okay, I have to stop or I have to push or anything like that. So definitely using the tool, but not a ton, I guess.
When I take a look at just sort of like all the different elements that maybe you could have seen these little marginal improvements to go from your debut to this performance, right? Like, there's probably a change of shoes, there's, fitness improving, fueling. Like, was there anything different that you did this time around? Like, what are some of the other like tiny things that maybe you point to make, this jump make a little bit more sense?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say the most part just comes from the confidence. I think a lot of people don't put enough weight on the half marathons that I've done right before this. So like the USA half champs in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, like that was a huge, turning point in my training just because being 2 weeks out, I had a good race there and allowed me to have that confidence coming into the full marathon. And that was actually something that I was thinking about probably like mile 18 or so, was that I was running pretty close to the half marathon pace that I was, previously, and got a little bit worried. Like, am I sure I'm doing this right? Like, can I hold this for the next whatever, 8, 10 miles? Um, but other than that, I would say fueling was a little bit different. In Twin Cities, I actually missed 2 bottles pretty early on. So I'm not sure how much that affected. I never really felt, you know, nutritionally fatigued or anything like that. So I wouldn't say it was super important, but I did get all my bottles this time for LA. So that was definitely a change. And then again, training has been a little bit different too. So kind of the combination of all three of those. And um, again, the biggest one is definitely that experience. But
Yeah, so you are coach. So explain to me, I guess, like the reasonings behind stacking these half marathons. I mean, again, even looking at the proximity between running your half marathon PR of 61:14 and then your marathon PR 2 weeks later, like, I guess when you put together your race schedule, like, why was that intentional?
yeah, I was a little bit nervous about the 2 weeks just because, it's pretty it's a close time frame, right? 2 weeks isn't a whole lot of time. But for me, again, I did the same thing before Twin Cities was had a half marathon a couple weeks out, and for me, that's where I place the most emphasis in training is just I think there's no better training than a race simulation or a race itself, right? So those half marathons are where I was focusing, and coming into LA again, having that one 2 weeks out just allowed me to say, okay, this is where I thought I did really good. And, looking at Atlanta, that half marathon, I struggled that first mile, and I'm not sure entirely what it was from, whether it was just not warming up completely or, it was a little bit colder that day, so that might have played into it. But that was something that I learned from and said, for LA, I'm going to be a little bit better about my warm up a little bit more, knowledgeable that first mile so that I was still in that group. Because Atlanta, I think that was where I don't want to say I messed up the most, but I kind of, if I could do it over, I would work on that first mile more. So,
So one thing that people have clung on to both in the comment section when I've seen just sort of like the graphic shared from this performance is just sort of like how difficult the LA Marathon course is. How do you sort of characterize it or describe it? Because it's not a pancake flat course where if we look at the guys who have run as fast as you have or faster, like it does come on, a lot of, the Chicagos, the Berlins of the world, but you got this done on LA's hilly course.
yeah, no, and that's something I think I'm, looking forward to the future, right? Both my marathons have been on fairly challenging courses. So, but honestly, for me, I think that actually suits me a little bit more. Maybe not time-wise, but just competition-wise, right? I've always been more of a cross-country guy than track, and um, especially like for long runs and stuff, I really enjoy the more of the uphill and challenging terrain that we're on. So um, I think the course was, I mean, it was definitely difficult, and especially that last mile. That last mile, I was feeling it quite a bit. That last hill, right? But no, I like that, and for me, actually. When I was looking at the course beforehand, one of the things that I was focusing most on was actually more of the downhills, just because I'm a little bit less confident on those. And, um, if you've ever run a long run with me or seen my training, like I do really like the uphills and push those pretty frequently when I'm working out and stuff like that. So, wasn't super worried about those, but it was, there's two really big descents in the LA Marathon. So, just kind of looking at those before, and again, you can't really go wrong with the downhill, right? But it's just something that I was a little nervous about.
I guess like what do you estimate if you put yourself like on the Chicago Marathon course with this fitness, the way you attacked and ran this race? Like in my head, I'm thinking like, are you a 206 guy at least like right now?
Yeah, I don't know, right? That's something that being new to the marathon too, I have no idea how that correlates. So, um, I really haven't thought too much about it, and I don't really like to think about things like that a ton, just because you can talk all day, right? But if you don't prove it, then it's not worth anything, right? So we'll see. I'm sure I'll get on a flat course at some point, and hopefully have a good training block before that. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think I can run faster on a flat course, but we'll see, right?
Yeah. So let's dive into a little bit of your training for this one, but starting off with the fact that you're self-coached, like
Mhm.
was that the same? Was that the case as well for Twin Cities? And like, where are you pulling your own sort of like coaching knowledge from?
Yeah, yeah, it was the same for Twin Cities, and really a lot of it. I mean, nowadays you can find a lot of training, all over, right? But most of my training came from what we were doing at Montana State with Coach Lyle Weiss there. Um, Pretty much all of my training has stayed the same since college, besides, well, I shouldn't say that. It's similar, but I've adapted it towards the marathon more. So I'm still doing similar workouts that I liked in college, but then I'll do, more emphasis on a long run, or, just prioritizing the workouts that I liked and maybe not focusing so much on the ones that I didn't like. But yeah, for me, it's kind of just trying out a bunch of different work, right? And I've had the opportunity to run with people from different groups, and see training from other athletes out there, so I can, try those a little bit myself, and take parts I don't like and take parts I do like, and incorporate, whatever I want. So that's kind of the beauty of it. But at the same time, like there are certainly some you know hard aspects to it, like again, not knowing how training corresponds to race time, right? um, but no, it's definitely a work in progress, and something that I do enjoy, and I think it has helped. But there's there's definitely more than one way to do it, right?
So when you run this time, people searched you up on Strava, and then you probably picked up a bunch of Strava followers, and people go back and review just sort of what the training was like in the build up to this. Is everything on Strava? Because I looked at it and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, no, I've gotten that question a lot. It is all there. I think the only thing I haven't posted, it was like the couple of runs I did in LA before, right before, but no, everything's all there. And I've gotten that a lot just because I think it is very different than most other marathoners and just training in general, right? But um, and again, I think I've talked with a lot of friends about this too, that my training is very different. Well, it's I don't want to say it's different because I think most people do it, but there's just some things that I don't do that others do, and there's differences, I guess, right? But um, no, for me, again, it's just finding out what works. And when I was looking at the marathon, it's like, well, how can I adapt my training that I was doing for 5K, 10K, and change it to find my strengths. And again, like I talked about, like I have always liked long runs, and um, really a lot of my workouts that I do aren't really written down or anything. I don't plan them out a ton. There are just some days where I'll get out there and I'm feeling good, and I'll say, oh, let's do something right now, right? So it's not super planned out and super scheduled like other athletes or programs have. And I think that actually has benefited me just to be able to prioritize recovery and, again, work on the things that I do enjoy and find that, build up my confidence and stuff like that. So obviously not everyone can do the training and it work out for them. And again, there's guys that are running the same times and doing the complete opposite training, right? So I'm not saying my training is perfect, but I think it's what works best for me at the time.
In one of my text groups, like the way someone put it bluntly was just sort of like, looking at his Strava, it looks more like a guy chasing a BQ than someone who is going out there and fully capable of running 207. Because I guess to that point of just like some days you get out there and you're like, all right, let's push it a little bit. Yeah,
Hmm.
it wasn't like I couldn't find exactly like all that many written out workouts. So that
Yeah.
was my next one of my questions I wrote down was just sort of like, where are the workouts?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, I guess I'll talk. There's always so much to talk about, right, with this, but um, so for me, when I went to the marathon, I increased mileage, and I've always been a little bit scared of mileage just because there's some risk involved, right? And it's just kind of the foreign territory. Um,
The highest you
so
touched was 100 this build, right?
for this one, I was 113.
Okay.
Twin Cities, I was 100. So, and I had never done that in college. I was 90s, high 80s for most of college. And so that's something that when I started training by myself, I said, okay, obviously you have to run more mileage, right? You can't run a marathon and whatever, 210 with only 70, 80 miles, right? Um, so again, being a little bit nervous about that, the way I look at it right now is when I'm increasing mileage or I'm hitting a high mileage week, that's a stressful thing that I'm putting to my body, especially not having done a whole lot of that before. So you can see most of my high mileage weeks, I'm focusing on the mileage and I'm not working out quite as much or if at all. Um, and like specifically in that 113-mile week, that was my highest mileage ever. And so I was taking it pretty easy. A lot of those runs were just easy runs or aerobic runs. Some of them did have a good amount of elevation gain, but I really didn't do anything quicker that week besides, I think that the last day I was a little bit quicker. But even then, I was only, I think, in the 630s or something. I don't know exactly, but nothing crazy. And again, that's my mentality is if I'm going through that high mileage, adding that stress in, I don't want to also have to worry about workouts and putting my body in a hole that can't recover for, a week or two down the road. Um, and again, I think that's very different than a lot of other people approach training. But again, for me, it's been working, and I've just enjoyed being able to train while feeling good and not going to the well every workout or feeling fatigued for weeks, months on end, right?
How does the Strava art fit into all of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's just something really to keep me, occupied or whatever you want to call it, right? I enjoy just having each run be a little bit different. Even if I'm running the same route or, anything like that, it's just to do something a little bit different. Like on Valentine's Day, you might have seen that one, like that. I've done that a couple times, but again, it's just something that I can wake up in the morning and say, you know what, like we're gonna do this today. It's something to get me excited, and that's kind of how a lot of my training is, just changing it up a little bit, and not doing the same thing every day. I'll still run a lot of the same routes, but like it's looking at different things or talking with different people. It's something to keep every run a little bit different, and that kind of carries over into this Strava, right?
What's been the most difficult Strava art to put together?
Oh, I would say so. I would actually say the heart this year was pretty difficult, just because it was a tough day because we had just gotten a ton of snow, and a lot of snow had formed into drifts, and I was trying to wade through it, and it was like pretty much walking at some parts. But then there was like a crust of snow on top and then soft snow underneath. And so for a couple of times, I think it was at least 3 times during that run, I was like trudging through the snow, trying to make my lines, to make the perfect shape. And then I'm, crushing through the snow, falling down, and then I gave up and just started crawling at some points, right? Just because it was so hard to. I tell you that was actually one of the hardest workouts, if you will, just heart rate wise, trying to crawl through that snow. But there's been some in the past that have not been that difficult with the elements, right? But just trying to figure out where to go, and a lot of the hard part too is remembering which street to turn on. Like, especially for that heart, it's like making the M or whatever you want to call it at the top is a lot of here, 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 all around. So just remembering where to turn is hard sometimes.
Is there a particular piece of art you have your eyes on? You're like, all right, I want to tackle this someday. Like, is there a figure, a shape, or whatever?
I've got some lined up, but yeah, nothing super extreme. No, and again, a lot of that too is just kind of it'll come to me one day and I say, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this today, right? So I have a little bit planned out, but nothing extreme or like I can't really explain what it would be, I guess. So
Yeah. Do you map them out yourself, or you find these online?
no, I map them out myself. Yeah.
Wow. No, it's so impressive. So when you say like we, like, do you have training partners? How much of all of this is solo?
Um, I would say it's kind of back and forth. For the most part, it's probably solo, but um, I've kind of been back and forth between Illinois and Montana training wise. So um, when I was in Illinois for whatever the last 6 months or so, I was actually helping out with the high school team where I graduated from. So a lot of the time I would be running with them a couple days a week. So I had them, and then also some friends from college too that I would run with for long runs and stuff like that. Or maybe they wouldn't do the whole thing, but we'd run 10 miles or something together, right? But back in Montana too, that's part of the reason that I did move back out there was just to have more of a training group. So I'll still run with the Montana State team a couple days, and then we actually have a fairly good group, and it's growing, week by week even, just of former collegiate runners or friends that, and actually like there's a bunch of people that we get out, and so I'm not with them every day for sure, but it's been more and more that I'm starting to run with them, especially for like long runs or something like that too. I'm normally with some other people. So
In your training, like from what we saw kind of like on Strava, is there anything else that you kind of supplement things cross training wise, like biking, hiking, whatever it might be?
I do a little bit, yeah. I think a lot of it too is just kind of lifestyle. Like I do live a little bit more of an active lifestyle, if you will. So I'm definitely not. I don't really do a whole lot of naps or anything like that. Like you'll see a lot of, especially like professional runners that will nap a lot and stuff like that. For me, it's just I don't know. I guess I should probably nap, right? But I don't really. So it's just kind of staying active during the day, and I will bike quite a bit. Um, yeah, especially once the snow starts to melt. I pretty much only ride my bike in Bozeman. Like I do have a car there, but I hardly use it most times. But then I'll do yeah hikes and stuff like that too. So and actually during the winter too, there's been a couple times where I've cross country skied or something like that too, just to keep it moving. Nothing extreme, but um, really again just to kind of feel like you're doing something different, right?
When you look back at just sort of like your Montana State career and kind of like the way things ended, there was like the cross country success in 2023, but even kind of again looking at the names that are around you now on this marathon all-time list, like there are so many
Oh,
of those people, whether it's a Ryan Hall, a Connor Mance, that like you look and can point to their track credentials as a sign of like, oh yeah, I mean they're gonna make a great marathoner someday. And for you, it was like you you didn't make NCAs, right? Like in the 10K the final year. So
no.
what were the signs that told you the move to the marathon was the correct one?
Um, Again, I didn't really plan that. It just kind of worked its way in. Again, I've always liked the longer distance, so you kind of have that thinking like, oh yeah, like the longer it gets, the better. So I tried a half marathon right out of college just because I was, training for actually trials, but didn't end up getting in, and then had some leftover fitness. So I said, there was a half marathon, a couple hours away. So I said, I'll do that. And so I really enjoyed it. You can't get the same environment anywhere else, track or anything like that, right? So it's just the whole community being there. It's pretty neat. So just really like that, and didn't have like a great day there, but it was enough where I was like, you know what? I've tried the half marathon. We might as well go for the marathon. Just let's just try it out. You can't come this far, right, and not try it, and then never run again, right? So, um, but yeah, it's like what you asked about, track times and all that. Um, I was talking with some people last night, and it's like I think a lot of people do have track times that correspond to marathon or half even, but it's not always the same, right? It's for me, the track is almost like an artificial running environment just because it's so focused on pace and time and all of that, and that's not something that I'm super good at. Like I've run fast times in the past, I guess, but like nothing nothing to your point to draw attention or indicate that I would have a good career afterwards, right? Um, so yeah, I know some people have said like my 10K even isn't that good, which I'm not arguing against them, but because like in the half even you look at some splits and it's like I'm pretty close to my 10K PR on the track for halfway, right? And so that's something that again I'm not super worried about. Um, I know it again. It's a little bit atypical than other people, but it's not something I put a whole lot of weight on just because I think it's very different style of racing. And again, like looking at the marathon, I mean, it's 20 miles further than a 10K, right? So um, I've kind of been thinking about this actually. It's almost like you're taking a miler and saying, well, why weren't you ever good at the 100? And it's like, okay, like it's still not quite that extreme, but it's almost that, it's a completely different distance. And most times you're good at the 10K and you're good at the marathon, but it's not always that case. And right now, I think if I ran a 10K, I would be probably faster than my PR, and maybe that might make people feel a little bit better about it. But again, it's not something I'm super worried about. So,
Connor Mance is someone who likes to keep like one foot on the track and then one foot on the roads, and that's obviously like paid major dividends for him. Are
mhm.
you open to the idea of returning to the track, or are you full on the roads now?
um, I mean, I haven't really thought it out too much. I'm like whatever. 5 months ago, I was didn't didn't even have a clue, right? But no, I wouldn't be surprised if I did get on the track a little bit. If you would have asked me that 2 months ago, I would have said I'm never stepping foot on a track ever again. But I've kind of come around to it a little bit, and I think it would be fun just to see where I'm at now on the track. Because again, I think my training, I know it's more marathon based now, but it's kind of carried over into the 10K too.
These half marathon performances, and of course, like this marathon, the two marathons that you've run were enough to kind of get that attention of like Asics. It's like, all right, he's worth a shot. Before
Hmm.
that, kind of between finishing up at Montana State and pursuing running professionally, like how did you support this dream, and like why did you want to keep it going?
Yeah, again, it wasn't ever a real plan of mine. Like I had actually talked with some college teammates, when I was still on the team, and we always had a conversation about, you know, if you had the opportunity, would you follow it? And at that time I was more on the I don't think I would like to run professionally, and that was mostly just because um, I don't know exactly, but I think there were benefits and some negatives to it, but and that's completely changed now. Obviously, like I love it and so happy with it, right? But um, yeah, again, like when I graduated or finished up school, like I was really just trying out the roads just to say that I did, right? I figured, if I didn't run after that point, then I should at least try and run a half or a full marathon, even just to, even check that off the list, if you will. But again, nothing really indicated that I could. Yeah, I shouldn't say that, but because like times were good, and obviously like cross, I had some good races, right? But um, no one was looking at that point to give me a contract or anything like that. And that's something that I think is super special to me, is that after that, my debut, like I was fortunate to get that contract with Asics because, I think in their position too, it's tough to, just go off that one performance, right? You know, I had talked with them right after the race, and it was something that I think we were both pretty happy with, but neither of us really knew where it was going to take us, or what the future was. And I think that's mostly just because, again, I only had one time to go off, which is kind of scary, right? And for a lot of that time, up until like even Houston, for the half there, it was like, was that kind of a fluke? Like, can I back that up here, or was that something that was, just one and done? So that was something, again, still building up to the LA, is just that confidence of, okay, like we can still do it on the roads. Like it wasn't something that was just a miracle in Twin Cities, right? And so I can't give them enough credit just for giving me that opportunity when it came, and them saying, we are going to take a chance. So, yeah, pretty happy with that now.
Are there any other professional runners that you draw parallels to, just sort of like in your approach to the sport? Because it's not like a Cam Levins tripling on some days and that heavy mileage. It's not, as intense as a Connor Mantz and Clayton Young, or as scientifically dialed as like a CJ Albertson. So, where do you kind of just sort of align yourself in the training mythology?
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm not super knowledgeable about specific people's training. The way I think about it, which I could be completely off about this because I haven't really researched it, but I almost feel like it's an old school kind of training method. Like, I know it's definitely not entirely, but it almost feels that way just because, again, for me, I think a lot of the times people do look at the science behind it and can draw conclusions off of that, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. But that's almost to me more of a track mentality just because, again, it's a little, I don't want to say artificial again, but it almost is that you take the science and predict something. For me, it's more just doing it and almost crossing your fingers, right? So there's no scientific thing that I'm going off of other than, I hate to call it common sense, but like it almost is like you run further, you run more and be able to run faster or whatever, right? But I know a lot of people disagree with that just because it is so atypical. But um, yeah, I guess to answer your question, I'm not really drawing or compare myself necessarily to anyone in particular or any training style, but and I think that's what makes it special almost is that it is sort of unique to me.
I feel like it aligns with so many people who do pursue this sport just for, the love of the game and just sort of like the grind that, uh, if it wasn't for the Asics contract and winning this race, I feel like he would have been like the ultimate blue collar runners, like,
Yeah.
model, I feel like.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, I don't know if we've talked about it too much, but training wise, that's kind of what I do go for. I'm not. I don't ever really use the treadmills. I don't think I've used the treadmill in a couple of years now. But like training in Montana too, it's February was really brutal. Just snow and being
Yeah,
below
what was the
freezing.
craziest run?
Oh, there was a couple. I can't pick just one. Well, okay, if you want to go way back, there was a run. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but it was freezing. Like I think I could double check, but I think it was like -20 or something with like that, and the wind chill was even worse. Um, and I don't know. I've always just wanted to do that, right? So I rigged like this little, I guess you could call it a mask. It was kind of like I think it was actually like a salad, um, like lettuce thing or whatever container that you buy from the store. And I had like that over my face, and I had a tube going down so I could breathe like through my shirt. So it was this big thing, but I think for me, again, it kind of is that just training through it and um, not everything's going to be easy. And I think that's where a lot of my training comes from almost too. Because, like, again, a lot of people will look at my training and say, like, oh, there's nothing impressive here. And I agree. But at the same time, like, I think a lot of people lose the context that I'm running in. And I'm not saying like running in cold weather does anything or running through the snow is going to change your life or something like that. But like for me, I think it's just the being able to get out there every day and continue no matter what. And like I mean, you can even look at like my mom even too. Like she doesn't run a ton, but she's done this thing in the past where she's enrolled in a program or whatever with her family, my aunts and grandma and stuff like that, where um, she does a mile every day. And that's something where not being familiar to running too, it's just like I'd see her sometimes where we had been busy all day and she gets home and it's 11 p.m. and it's like, well, it's dark out and you got to get it done. And that kind of comes back to me too because um, I think that's where a lot of mine comes from. So
Do you have a photo of the contraption that you wore around your face with the
Yeah, I do. I did post one to Strava, so it's somewhere down there.
All right, I'll
You
have to
have
look
to
for it.
scroll, but yeah, it's somewhere in there. But there's been other runs too. Like I've done a couple this year where there's a run where we normally go. It's called River Road in Bozeman, and it's one of our flatter long runs actually, but um, it's an unpaved. It's a dirt road, and it's kind of a weird. There's houses on one side, a couple houses, and then nothing for a stretch of a couple miles, and then houses on the other side. So I went out there like all excited, um, and it was just completely snow covered. It wasn't plowed past any of the houses on either side, so I had to like again trudge through the snow, walking through parts just because it was coming up to my waist, and it was tough because I got to the other side of it and there's a loop, but then you have to come back the same way. So I was doing I think 15 miles that day. So it was, after I got through the snow, I was thinking, man, like I have to run 10 miles or whatever, 12 miles and then go back through all of that. And the sun was setting and it was just like, man, like that was a tough run. But and again, I don't want to say like that's a huge benefit to me, but I think it doesn't maybe do as much physically, but it does a lot mentally for me.
Yeah, you sounded like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant, like, and just sort of like how crazy that was. But does can American distance running fans hold on to the hope and thought that you're gonna stick to the roads for a while? Because it sounds like it's like you have all the makings of a great trail and ultra runner.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I would love to try the trails. Like that was being in Bozeman too. There's so many opportunities, and a lot of my friends are on the trails too. So that's something I would like to experiment with. Um, and I don't know how that would work, just because I know it's difficult to balance both of them. I know there are good examples of people that can balance them. Um, but just, we'll see. I would love to try the trail, but it's going to be hard to not choose the marathon, right? So we'll see.
Because I'm looking at when you were rattling off just sort of some of the races that you've done. I go back to 2024 after the NCAA regionals, and then you said
Mhm.
you ran a half marathon. I don't see it on here. Was that just sort of for the hope of qualifying for, or 2023 actually, right? Like the hope of qualifying for the marathon trials in 24?
No, this would have been in 24 already. I
Oh,
was
okay,
still in
gotcha.
school for trials. Um, so yeah, it's I don't think it's on my World Athletics or anything like that, but I did do two half marathons right before the Twin Cities, and that was the first one was Missoula half, and then the second one was Bozeman half. So both
Okay,
in Montana. Um, yeah, so I don't think they're on
gotcha.
that. They're somewhat smaller races. Missoula half is that was again really fun race, and then Bozeman was again just to be where I was training, and have I had a lot of support there too, just because we always every year we go out there with bikes and watch the race go on. So I had some teammates come out and watch me too.
On the other end of the spectrum of just places that you've run, did I also see Portugal, Hawaii, like the kind
Yeah,
of total opposite of freezing cold?
yeah, no, and that's the thing. Yeah, it's I was a little bit worried with that just because it's hard to run and travel. But yeah, I guess I can't I can't talk too much about that just because I don't really know what happened, right? But yeah.
So, in thinking of just sort of this jump to the marathon at what is it? You're 25.
Yep.
Does that feel like the sweet spot right now? Because it's like when for the longest time, and this is something I think I've talked about before with a variety of different people. It felt like Americans waited way too long to jump up to the marathon. It'd be
Hmm.
once the wheels start to come off in the 10K, that's your sign to move up to the marathon. And versus what we see internationally, like Japan and the number of, 207 guys that they crank out. Like a lot of those guys are coming straight out of college. That
Mhm.
I guess, like, is this the sign for more people like you to kind of try and follow in this model?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something too that a lot of people have pointed out to me, and I feel kind of weird saying this, but like before I came to the roads, I didn't know much about them at all. So really, for me, when I came to the marathon, I didn't know that it was not normal to go straight out of college to them. Um, to me, it just seems like a normal progression, right? Like I wasn't going to do anything on the track, and like again, I enjoyed the roads. So um, I think in the future, I think you will see more people coming straight to the roads out of college, um, just because I think there's a lot of opportunities. You can race all across the country. You don't have race roster limits or start list limits or anything like that. Really, you can pretty much fit you know thousands of people on there, right? But um, so it's a little bit more accessible, even, which I think kind of helps. But again, I'm a little bit surprised that more people don't come to the roads right away. Um, I think you see a lot of it, people with the mentality that, as you age, you get better in the marathon, and your peak is not even until your 30s or whatever. But I think that is true for a lot of cases, but also at the same time, there's no reason that you can't have success right out of college, right? Um, I would say maybe the biggest obstacle is just the change in training, right? Because again, you're racing 20 miles further than you were in college, so um, getting that under control could maybe be a little bit of the barrier, but um, yeah, I think more people will come, especially with the way everything's trending, right? Like, um, I mean, there's so many fast times in all disciplines right now. The half, the full marathon, the 10K, like it's amazing this last Olympic cycle, like seeing all the Americans on both men's and women's side, like there's just so much talent being showcased right now for Americans. So it's really cool to see.
So I figured out a way to figure out just how blue collar you are, and I'm gonna go through all of these. I go overrated, underrated with these with coaches, and I go through a variety of different elements of training. So we'll see how many you score on, and I feel like by the end of it, we'll know if you're how blue collar you are. So first off, Alter G. How much have you used it?
I've never been on one.
All right, easy enough. Double threshold.
We did a little bit in college. I'm I haven't done any this cycle, and I did a little bit for Twin Cities, but probably won't do much from now on.
0 for 2. Blood lactate testing.
So I did actually do that kind of one time, but it was just kind of for fun almost. It was, yeah, it was kind of just for fun, but did
All right,
do
we
it
won't.
once.
Yeah, we won't count it though. So 0 for 3. Super shoes, of course. What'd you race in?
I raced in the Metaspeed Edge.
Cool.
Hmm.
Soft surfaces. I mean, I feel like you run on that all the time, and that's not really that blue collar. So it's just an element of training.
Yeah.
Pacing lights. You don't use those. BU's
Mhm.
track. Did you ever race there while you were in college?
I did. Okay, so actually, quick story about that.
Yeah.
This would have been right after 2022 cross country nationals. And that was like at the time the best race of my life. I was 40th, so barely squeaked into All American, right? Just like it came down to the line pretty much. And then went to BU with high expectations and just didn't have a good time. It was okay. I mean, I PR'd, so I guess you can't complain about that, but um, wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, I'm seeing that one now. 13:51, right? But the outdoor PR is 13:47 from April last year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Bicarb.
I didn't even know what that was until about 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Weightlifting.
I don't weight lift, really.
Okay. Cross training while healthy. I mean, you said you bike a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I don't do. I bike a lot to get around, and I think this training block I did do one. We have an indoor bike in our house, and I did use it one time for an hour. I think that was must have been a week. No, it must have been 2 weeks before Atlanta.
Okay.
But
Still, for the most part, just sticking to running. Altitude. I mean, what 100% of this block? No.
probably 50,
50.
50%. Yeah, because
Still, yeah.
actually, probably only. So I was in Illinois from May until February.
Okay.
So I had 6 weeks at altitude.
Mm-hmm. Uh, strides and jogging rest. I mean, it doesn't seem like you're doing too much of it,
No,
right?
I'm not a strider. I've never been a strider.
So, of all those things, it feels like I think there was one or two that you've incorporated into training. So, I'm ready to label you very blue collar when it comes to your training. Well, Matt, I mean, this has been fascinating, I think, to catch up with you after such a big performance. So many people were scratching their heads, and I think we've brought quite a bit of answers for them. I know it's a hard question to like throw on someone just days after a marathon, but what's next?
Yeah, and that's something I haven't figured out yet. I didn't have anything lined up after this. And then looking forward, I mean, right now I'll take some time down. Probably won't run for a while, a couple weeks yet, but and then we'll see. I mean, I would hope to get in a fall marathon and have another training block before then, but I know I'll talk and see what the options are for the future because I haven't really narrowed anything down yet, I guess. But is not a great answer to your question, but I guess it's where I'm at right now. So
Yeah, I know appearance fees play like a big role in like future fall plans, and after a race like this, you're so well deserving of one. It sounds, I guess, the rumor is that Chicago already owns the American record on the women's side, world record on both the men's and women's side, and they're missing the American record on the men's side, and they're going to be fairly aggressive, I think, about trying to get that this fall. Kind of makes sense. Connor Mance would be lined up for something like that just because he's a Nike athlete, but I mean,
hmm
it also sounds like you don't back down from competition and would be welcoming to the idea of going up against like guys like that in a race potentially that fast.
Yeah, and I think the draw for me to Chicago is just growing up 40
That's
miles away.
right.
It would almost be like a hometown race. And again, I know there's kind of been talks a little bit about which races and blah, blah, blah. But um, I mean, I would love to do Chicago and really, any race, I'm happy with any race. But like you said too, I think getting in a big race too, where I'm kind of more in a pack, and not that I wasn't for these, but um, just knowing a little bit where I'm at now and being able to apply that to a deeper pack, I think would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the thought just crossed my head but this probably puts you up pretty high, like on the pecking order for like a world championship spot. Is that something you'd consider too?
Okay, so I'm kind of new to this, and I feel a little bit bad saying this, right? But I don't even know how that works, really.
Yeah, so
So,
I think it goes off of like world ranking, and I think USATF also prioritizes just like the fastest since the qualifying period opened, and since then,
uh-huh.
I think the top three would probably be Bia, Connor, and you, or yeah, I think it's probably that combination.
hmm
Granted, whatever might happen in Boston, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like you'd be in the running for it too.
Yeah, no, and I would definitely be open to that. Again, I'll definitely have to do more research and see, how they determine that and everything too. But no, that's something that I definitely love.
Yeah. Well, it just sounds like there's many more opportunities after this past weekend, and so very excited for you. Matt, appreciate you taking the time for this.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.